will wake the activist in you. And I've learned a lot about who I really am through my activism and through having conversations like the ones that we're going to have today. And I now know that I am so much more beyond what I thought my race said about me. And I'm so much more beyond my gender and my sexuality as well. Who am I is a question each and every one of us has to ask at some point in this life. Some of us go our entire lives trying to figure it out and never really do. Who are we is a question more pertinent, I think, to humanity at large today. In the state of our world currently, I think we've all been asking ourselves this question recently. And in the oftentimes grueling process of trying to figure it out, sometimes it might seem more comfortable to let others tell us who we are. But eventually something won't seem right. Something won't add up about what we've been taught, and we'll be right back on the search again. The world, as we know it, is set up to signal us into a very limited idea about who we are and who we're supposed to be. And we're conditioned into believing that nothing exists outside of these limits as soon as we're born. You know, it's no secret that certain expectations, or sexpectations, as I like to say, are placed on us based on really what is in between our legs. But where do you think that comes from? Like, is it religion? Is it us? Is it the consumer market? Is it what we're willing to buy into? Is it what we're willing to believe in and to perceive as the irrevocable and undisputable truth? At birth, we're assigned to either one of two classifiable gender roles, really based on our genitalia. And from there, the sexpectations begin. We know them. Girl equals pink, high heels, Barbies, makeup. Boy equals blue, race car, sports, dominance. And if you fit outside of those confines, you are not the norm, you're not commonplace. And this would make feeling validated and really navigating our social construct a bit more challenging and confusing for obvious reasons. It is this same social construct that can and has caused body dysmorphia, as well as just plain old self-hatred amongst young people all the way from its beginning, whenever it was, you know, and it trickles into your adult life too. As I said, like, I have grown into this person, like, who, I don't know, it's like my version of confident, and I know I'm flawed, and I know I'm messy, but I've grown into a person who, like, has more of an awareness about who they are, but I still can't shake the notion, for whatever reason, that what is inherently natural to me is actually unnatural to the larger population. And I'll give you some examples. Like, if I'm riding the subway and I happen to be wearing makeup that day, even if nothing is said about it, this subtle anxiety, like an instinctual anxiety, rises up within me. Because I know that the rules of our social construct say, hey, filthy animals don't wear makeup. And it's like, makeup is a contrived additive, yo. It's an elective. It's unnatural, regardless of what is in between your legs or how you identify on the gender spectrum. It's so bad for your skin. It causes breakouts. So I feel like it's a try at your own risk thing, if anything at all. And if I want to put it on because I think it looks cute, why shouldn't I be able to? But I digress. Okay. I experienced that same great divide, that same great lie, so intensely whenever I'm out shopping for clothes. Because if I want to venture over into the women's section, as I do, and I'll have you know, this entire outfit, well, not the pants. Okay, most of my outfit, well, not pants because they don't make crotch sizes. Anyway, you see what, honey, she's like got to be able to fit into whatever she's gonna put on. But in any event, if I want to go venture over into the women's section, its very name says, unicorn galaxies don't shop there. You know, and by the way, clothing is cloth, and it's unnatural. It's a contrived additive, really, regardless of what is in between your legs or how you identify on the gender spectrum. And high heels are the most unnatural thing that we don on our bodies. They hurt. That's your first indicator. and they cause long-term damage to your skeletal structure. So if somebody wants to wear them because they think they look cute when they put them on, why shouldn't they be able to? But, you know, I digress. And I had an epiphany, okay? I feel like the real reason queer people have this affinity for the unicorn as a symbol is because, like them, the consumer market says that they don't exist. And what else do people have to go off of? It is like this lie, this exclusionary illusion that has like created this false idea that we might not all be equal, you know, if we're not included in what we see when we go out into the world. And so I pose the question, how can we change our social construct to make it one that is more inclusive for all human beings? How can we change our social construct to make it inclusive for all human beings? It's a big question. And I think it might start with the way that we think about it. It would probably require a collective stream of consciousness that actually expands the rules of our social construct, and it would probably require us to forge a new social construct that says unicorns exist if we want them to. I wish our world wasn't so void of magic. I know that's like a really hippy-dippy way of saying that, but I do believe that normalcy is to blame for our inability to progress together in that way. Societal norms, they affect us all on a subliminal level by default. The Merriam-Webster textbook definition for the word normal is conforming to a type, standard, or regular pattern. And that type, and that standard, it's one that is taught. And unfortunately, it's not really reflective of humanity in its entirety. And that's because there really is no one factory pattern for what it means to be a normal human being. And the privilege that comes from living in a city like New York or Philadelphia is all you have to do is walk out into the day to see that. You know, I walk down the street and I see people of every type, every creed, every race, every gender, every size, all sharing space and all shattering this false idea of normalcy. But the funny thing about it is when you look up at the larger-than-life billboards for household brands like Gap, Target, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, you name it, you can see that the idea of what we're taught is normal is actually a loud and obnoxious lie that is constantly flashing in front of our faces in bright beaming light. You know, think about how those standards, however they came to be, might have an effect on those who fit outside of the most widely accepted or expected in terms of all that has become attached to what it means to be a normal human being. I always ask people to try to empathize with what it must feel like to have to be trained, to really trained, to understand yourself as an oddity, abnormal, or different. Imagine for a moment what it might feel like to have to look at your phones or into your TV screens at the signs that berate our existence on a constant, having to say, well, that isn't for me, that isn't me, I could never have that, I could never wear that, I will never be that. And the funny thing about that is I think each and every one of us in this room and each and every one of us watching right now, we've experienced this at some point when looking at an advertisement. We know this feeling. We know this feeling of distrust when looking at an advertisement. And yet, we still continue to perpetuate it. Or, at the very least, still try to live up to it. Some of us knowing we never will. And what I'm really urging everyone listening to my whole spiel to do is to reflect on what human empathy really is. Because I think human empathy is what will inevitably lead to human understanding. And on the subject of human understanding, there are a number of marginalized groups that are underrepresented at large. You know, I'm usually booked at colleges or wherever, speaking venues to talk about issues concerning gender and sexuality. It's really hard for me to stay locked in on, because when you get to talking about inequity, certain issues concerning race and class begin to intersect and become equally relevant. But One thing I think that has helped in our effort to better understand LGBT folk, queer folk, is understanding the difference between gender and sexuality, right? Well, does anybody here want to like give me their definition of the difference between gender and sexuality? If you haven't ever thought about it before, that's fine too. Like we're all different there, but like how might one of you, like if you feel so bold and brave to sound off about it, how might you describe that? It's okay, it's awkward for me to ask. Yeah.
To go off on a limb.
Yeah, do it.
In this space, solidly. I feel like I'm in human sexuality class in my psychology, so we did the whole gender thread, 12-figure diagram, and we thought of gender as an identity base and sexuality as an orientation, whereas gender is full-bodied expression, but also part of your identity and how you think about yourself versus like sex is biologically what you're assigned at birth, and gender is just how you embody yourself, which is also socially constructed of what we think about man and woman, femininity and masculinity. So even that's just a whole complexity, but then sexual orientation is more like based on attraction and preference, or lack thereof.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything is on a spectrum and could be fluid, whether you think you are one or the other or in between or neither. It's definitely, I don't think it's absolute. I think those are socially constructed, but it's so fluid and on a spectrum. And I think that's what our generation's really coming to accept.
Yeah, you know what? You said it so beautifully. And like, it's hard for a lot of people to grasp like something, like even the very concept of fluidity, because we're so trained to like be very rigid in how we define everything, right? So that we can communicate effectively. That's like really what it boils down to. Vocabulary, in essence, is really needed for us to articulate this. And I love the way that you said it. And there's like, so yeah, well, like what you basically in essence said is like gender is who you go to bed as, and sexuality is who you go to bed with, right? I think that is a great way of putting it. But the English language is one of the most difficult to learn because in it there's so many words that mean multiple different things, right? And sex is one of them, because you also use the word sex in reference to biology. And I'm like of the mind of like wanting to push us away from using sex in reference to our body parts, because I think it's just so confusing. And I think it just, it makes the conversation so gray for a lot of people when really this is like a clear thing that we're trying to articulate. And so for me personally, I feel like we already have a great word that describes body parts, and that is anatomy. And I don't know why we are using sex all the time in reference for our body parts. I don't know why sex is on my driver's license. I really don't, because it just can be a lot of like queer progressives are pushing to remove the word sex from gender and anatomy, and then talking about gender anatomy, sex as in like, you know, sexual preference, sexual intercourse, or like what you might, you know, be sexually attracted towards. Like, I feel like that would be like, but anyway, that's, again, I digress. Like, but yes. And I think understanding the difference between gender and sexuality is crucial to our understanding of queer people in general, and to our understanding of one another. Right? I think the best way for us to expand our consciousness on that subject matter and so much more, thereby expanding the rules of our social construct, is for us to get to know one another better. It's for us to understand one another. It's for us to share our stories with one another. I was talking about sharing stories in there. That's a trope that I still carry to this day. That was, well, I guess that makes sense because that was only like a year ago. So storytelling is like so important to me. Listening to each other's stories with empathy, looking for stories that are unique to our own life experiences. We should want to get to know each other. And we should do this because one thing I know for certain, as corny as it sounds, as redundant as it is to say, what we have in common will always outweigh what makes us different. And it's so true when you think about it, because we all want the same things. We all need the same things. We all need food, water, and shelter to survive. We all need air to breathe to live. Whether we want to admit it or not, we all want to love. We all want to be loved. We all want to be happy. We all want a fair shot at this thing called life. And you know what? We all deserve that. And this understanding is crucial to our understanding of one another. So we have to be willing and just willing to relate to one another more openly, even when it seems impossible. And I think social media has actually proven to be a great tool for this when used tactfully. Okay, like if we use social media to share our stories, we can reach broader audiences, we can bring more people to a common understanding, we can connect, it's all good, but I cannot stress enough that we gotta be tactful about how we use social media. We have to use it responsibly. It's like any great power. I love comic books. The best thing that ever came out of comic books, though, is like, with great power comes great responsibility. There's so much truth. That's such a heavy statement, and it's so true. So I don't know if it originated from, that's where I first heard it. It's probably not where it first came from. But yes, and one of the saddest things I think we've been seeing as of late is how quickly we've become, really, if I'd be so bold to say, ever since Donald Trump came into office in 2016, and y'all can check me on it if you want, that's just what I think, how quick we've become to close our minds and our hearts off to anybody who has an opinion that differs from their own. We are seeing the blocking and canceling of people at an all-time high. I think in our society, so many of us are sometimes searching for a moral purity in people that you're just never gonna find. All you can find is progress and not perfection. And that's what we should be striving towards. If we completely cut people down every time they make a mistake, or they show their ignorance, or heaven forbid, we unearth a mistake that they made from 10 years ago, well, people are gonna feel like there's no progress, or there's no value in progress or learning whatsoever, because you're forever punished for the sin that you no longer stand by. People can always learn. It's what we do. We shouldn't be so quick to give up on each other that way. So yes, storytelling, empathetic storytelling, and listening to each other's stories, giving people grace, giving people a chance. I'm not saying it's an easy task, though. No, along the journey, you are going to meet people who disagree with you and are going to say hurtful things from a place of intentional malice and outright disrespect. But when your instinct tells you to hit that block button or to cancel that person, I'd rather urge for you to keep that conversation going from a place of empathy and understanding. I would challenge you to forgive. Why is forgiveness such a lost concept, y'all? Like, for real, that is like so heartbreaking to think about. I would challenge you all to forgive, knowing that life is a process for everyone. And it isn't up to any one of us to drag anybody along through that process. We can try, but it's not our responsibility. And if you're scared, I get it. But we gotta be willing, we gotta be strong enough. We have to be allies with one another in the interest of the human collective by being brave enough to build bridges of understanding, even when it seems impossible, especially when it seems impossible, because it's impossible to hate a person whose story you know. So what I would say, if you're afraid of what that might subject you to, is quite simply don't be, because this world has a way of making you forget about the power that you have. We have so much more power than we will ever give ourselves credit for. And we can face great challenges that we regularly scare ourselves out of facing. We have power over what we allow to hurt us and over what we fall weak to, in the same way that it is our power in action when we decide it's time to get back up again. And we do it all the time, okay? We have control over the power that we endow certain words with, and that is why I don't have a preferred gender pronoun. I don't, because those words, they don't hold power over me and how I live my life. And they used to. They used to hold dominion over my entire existence until I was able to expand the rules of my social construct and say, you know what? Unicorns do exist if I want them to. So what are you willing to believe in? What are you willing to stand up for? What are you willing to forgive? What are you willing to say? What are you willing to buy into? These are questions that are dependent on really one person and one person only, and that's you. You know, the power is yours. growing up, I was taught to believe that I was too girly to be a boy. And so I developed an interest in androgyny, thinking this concept might provide some sense of belonging. But when I started throwing the word androgynous out there, people started to say that I was too boyish physically to really be considered in that sense either. I was always too black to be white and too white to be black. On the schoolyard or in the cafeteria, kids would segregate themselves based on race, and I remember the impossible confusion that would present being mixed. And in my career pursuits, as I got older, the fluid expression of my gender and my racial ambiguity really made it impossible for me to be cast into any archetype or get any work in that field. But over time, what I've realized is that I just needed to get to know myself on a deeper level. I think that the sweet victory on this quest for human understanding is for us to get to know ourselves on a deeper level, for us to recognize our truth beyond all of these categorical labels that we've been taught to bear. We are so much more than our clothes and our colors. I think it's important to note that we've had to get very detail-oriented about the history of systemic racism in America, and we've had to get very detail-oriented, as we talked about, in terms of defining the difference between gender and sexuality. But the purpose of this is for us to have these conversations. Don't take it beyond that. Don't drive yourself crazy, because it'll prey on your mental health. And in the interest of your preservation, like your mental health preservation, remember that these are just tools, these words. They don't rule over you. They're meant to empower you, but you gotta know how to use them right. You gotta know how to share your story lovingly. That's my spiel. I really hope we can live in the awareness one day that we are so much more beyond all this mess that we are constantly putting ourselves through and trying to, that we're constantly putting on ourselves and trying to sift through. And I see beauty in each and every one of you, and I just got nothing but love. And yeah, I'd really love to open the floor now for like a Q&A, perhaps. It could be about anything, or maybe you just want to share a story of your own. Like, that would be beautiful. And I know with Corona, I'd be like, here, have the mic, but I just slobbered all over it, and like, yeah, protocol. So, yeah, and if y'all maybe could tell me if they can hear on the stream or not, questions that are being asked or stories that are being told, I would love to be able to, I don't know, share them. So.
Yeah, Cory, you might want to, if someone asks you a question, you might want to kind of paraphrase that question back when you respond.
Yeah, okay.
So that way we can catch it all.
I will do that.
There were any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the first ones that hurt us. And I guess, should I like, can they see me on the stream? I feel like I'm like Mary Poppins. I don't know. Like story time. But really though, like story time is so needed. I know I talked about too many things. I'm like all over the place.
Cory.
Thank you. Hi, Todd.
Hi, Cory. Cory and I talked a lot, and one of the things I found fascinating last fall when I spent 90 minutes with Cory chatting.
I loved it.
He mentioned his spirituality, and I found it so captivating or whatever, because I think some people don't believe a gay person can have religion or spirituality, and you explained it so great, like how you approach that. I thought that maybe you could share that again, and I think that'd be awesome.
I would love to. I would love to. And I really think that, I really think, like, first off, I want to say, like, each and every person has the capacity to be spiritual. That's a choice, because we are all spiritual by default. I mean, there is this miracle to our existence that we haven't even figured out, and that, my friends, is your indicator, like, that you are pure magic, right? So don't ever let anybody tell you that it's not for you, or that you aren't allowed to partake in that or feel that or have a relationship with God or what you call God, because guess what? It all boils down to language, right? And we have to remember that, like, language is so powerful it's so great and so terrible. You know what I mean? Because it is something that allows us to take all of these esoteric ideas and relay them to one another and share them, but it's also something that really does limit us, because as we've learned, there are things that we just don't have words for, and I think God is one of them. I think spirituality is one of those things that you could never even begin to put into words. And so a lot of the time when people take issue with me saying I'm spiritual, you know, it has to do with the Bible. It always comes back to the Bible, and the Bible really is words, you know, words that were interpreted as the voice of God, or like Spirit speaking through the people who put those words on the page. But make no mistake, people put those words on the page. And I do think it's beautiful. It's a piece of art, and it's giving people so much, you know. And my brother, oh man, Todd, I've got to tell you about my brother. Like, I know, I feel like we need like another one of those, like, great. Like my brother is like very religious and like very Bible-centric in that way, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad way to be. But a lot of the time, like certain ideologies, because of the way things were written. Oh, do you want me to just talk about the big elephant in the room? Like how in the Bible they talk about like gay people are going to hell? I should do that. Yeah, let's talk about it. So that iteration of the Bible was in the 1940s. You know, that was something that changed over time. And the story that they're telling in the Bible, which I believe is, oh man, I am not a Bible person. I'm not even gonna try. But it was about like an angel that was like having a sexual relationship with like a human, and like, I don't know, fire and brimstone, like all that mess. Anyway, it's like a story that was like later interpreted to mean that. So we have to remember that, like these ideas, these concepts, they shift through history as we are changing and growing now, you know, like, so yeah. But also I have this Southern Baptist grandmother.
Yeah.
She's so Bible. She is fierce. She's fiercely, like she loves God. She speaks in tongues and like rolls out on the floor. I love this woman, but we've had our differences, obviously. I mean, she was one of the first people to ever tell me I was going to hell. That was quite traumatic, you know, 17, coming out of the closet, telling her, because I look at her as just like pillar of like grace and inspiration. And I told her, and she was like, well, that's the end of our relationship. But later in life, after Top Model, she's like, oh, I always knew Cory was going to be the one to make our family famous. You know, so we started talking again, and we found out that we both love Oprah. So, so we still talk. Anyway, man, I tangent. My boyfriend on the way here was like, Cory, when you answer the people's questions, don't tangent, because you do that a lot, and you answer it very quickly, and then you just keep talking, and then it's bad. So don't do that. And I just did it. So you're welcome.
I don't know how to word this exactly, but so I feel like because you're so well known and that you have your thing, it's easy for you to not use specific gender pronoun.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say in now the age when we introduce ourselves, we introduce a pronoun, how would you go about saying your pronoun is different, or like, does that make sense?
I love that question. Well, yeah, it's easy for me, and maybe like, I get why you would say that. But I think it's just like you said it. Like if you, like it's okay to say I don't have any preferred gender pronouns, y'all. Like you don't have to pick one. Like I mean, if you want to, if it empowers you and it makes you feel like you can navigate this dense world, which is a trial, easier, then I want you to do it. But I'm just saying you really don't have to. And I think what it boils down to is like this inner dialogue, this conversation that you have to have with yourself. You have to know yourself up to a point at which you are able to say like, I really don't care, you know, but that's on you. And it's really for you to decide. Like, I can't tell you, like, you know, but you are allowed to, and it's a conversation starter, and it's the conversation that I'm not always ready to have, I'm not always prepared to have, you know. But the thing is, like, people shouldn't be asking you about like why you identify the way you identify anyway. Like that is like something that you shouldn't even be talking about with anyone unless you feel comfortable doing so. And you have to get to know them first. So if your first interaction with this person, because that's the only time you'd be sharing your pronouns. Like if it's the first time that like, you know, or maybe like second or third, because I know how that goes. Like, come on, like, it shouldn't open a whole conversation about like what that is, and it's not your responsibility to explain that, but it's your feelings, feelings. I teach inclusive sex ed as well, like for young kids in grades 5 through 7, with a nonprofit in New York, and kids ask me this question, and I always say, I write it big on the whiteboard, first thing, feelings equal truth. That's the overarching thing of it. It's just, if somebody wants to open a whole, like, inquisitive, like, oh, like, I want to know why, just be like, it's the way I feel. Done. You know what I mean? And then if you want to educate them later, you can, but, like, that's how I would go about. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So how a question was associated with, like, a story, too. So I'm in a class right now where we're thinking about just, like, college in general. And we've been having a lot of discussions about like how to have like difficult discussions about like whether it be like identity or just like things that are happening on campus. And one person in the class made a comment of like, oh, I want to be able to like, for instance, talk about gender and sexuality, like theories about gender and sexuality, but without any personal experience attached to it. And I had a very visceral reaction of being very angry and frustrated and very sad also when I heard that, and I told them that. But I also see where they're coming from as well, but I just, for me personally, I don't know how to have conversations like that without the personal, or if that is possible, then I just want to know what you think about that.
Well, yeah, it's absolutely personal, like for each and every person. I think that's undeniable. And I think it's like that personal relationship with gender exists subliminally in a lot of people because of, as I spoke about, like our indoctrination into this world and how we are introduced to gender. As if it like says so much about us, then we just subscribe to, and like without our own self-discovery or self-exploration. It's absolutely rooted in feeling, and what that person's project is to me is nothing more than like a history lesson on, or a history project on oppression, or a history lesson on how people have been, but it says very little about who we actually are, And if you, like being the magical human I know you are, like feel compelled to speak up. I always say to people, those butterflies in your stomach that make you feel uneasy in a situation, that's actually spirit moving in you, saying, oh, it's time. Like, here's the call. Do I answer it or do I go dormant? Well, I think the fact that you did share how you felt is just beautiful. That's your power in action. That's you literally being like, higher truth right now. Like, it actually is connected to feeling. And it's okay that you want to do that, but it's not gonna teach anybody anything, because we've lived this already. Like, we've already done that. So fine, write it down for the history books, have fun. I'm sure people are gonna like be kicking and screaming, like, and as they have been, as we transcend and progress into this new higher vibration of really understanding who we are on a, in a more real sense. It doesn't change anything about you. You know what I mean? The only advice I could give is to lead with love when you have to have that conversation. It's not always the easiest thing, but that's like, it's like in the moment, the heat of the moment, how do you go meditative and say, oh, I'm gonna lead with love? Like, because it just happened, and you're like, but I think it just comes with practice and in those situations, you know what I mean? You're gonna be like, okay, the next time I have to educate somebody, I'm not gonna let my emotions like go like run over the whole thing, because then, well, that's also like a big thing with like communication, because these people who are not ready to rise to our vibration are literally missing they're missing your beautiful truth. It's miscommunication, because all they see is emotion. A lot of people write that off as crazy, but it's not. But it's just not something. Not everybody is empathetic. That's just, and the empath is like this person who's in tune with like this magical side of themselves that is more apt to like feeling the energies of people. It's true. Like, but who's the name of that author? I want to tell you the name of the author of a great book that would be great for you after. It's been really helping me. Judith Orloff. The empath. Oh man, it like saved my life, but I will tell you about it. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, babe. That's another tangent. Damn. Yeah.
The question before you had answered talked about, and just in general, like your whole spiel.
Yeah.
It's crazy that we're like the same. We have very similar experiences. First of all, biracial, navigating what it means to be like LGBT or queer, and have this very long.
Honey.
But also like navigating gender, and sexuality. Like, if I could share a little bit of my story, briefly. I was always a tomboy, very masculine, like emo. I went to the men's section. She was like, "Honey, come back."
Mm-hmm.
As a baby, I cried in dresses. Like that was very evident. And I remember in 10th grade, I found the word agender and non-binary, and I was like, okay. And what you said about having the language and vocabulary to empower you, I feel like that was my way of expressing like my androgyny, like masculine and feminine, because I just felt I didn't want to be either or, but I want to be both. Or sometimes this way, or sometimes that way, but not think of myself as a man or woman because I hated those social constructs so bad.
Right.
I didn't want to be viewed as one or the other. I just wanted to get rid of man and woman because I wanted to be both feminine and masculine.
Yeah. Because you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because you are. Like, and it's really not for me to say. I'm just regurgitating like that after like hearing your, yeah. Because listen, like, I resonate. And it was like, I love what you said about like when you saw the term agender come up, you were like, oh my gosh, you feel seen. Oh, go figure, you feel seen when there's a word that actually describes how you feel. You know, I don't know why people take issue with that. I don't know why people are so hell-bent on excluding like these terms from the conversation. It's really, oh man, hateful people, y'all. Or it's really, it's not hate, it's fear. It's fear. It's like this, and also like the people who are like, oh, I have to put in more work and like learn more. I'm like, baby, you're gonna be learning your whole time here from birth up until you're ready to transcend to the next. You are learning, and you are learning, and you've learned, you know, and it's like experiential for you. And now you have a word that like, that's so cool. And it's a beautiful story because I think, I don't know, also when you feel seen in this life, like you're empowered to be able to share that truth and bring more people. Like some people have it worse than you and aren't even able to. I feel like we have a lot of parallels. Like I remember, like I felt at least bold enough to go over to the women's section, even if my mom said, "What are you doing? Like, get out of there." At least I went. There are a lot of kids who are like so oppressed who like they wouldn't even dare to think. You know what I mean? And that's something like there are people who are like so suppressed and like so far, so low vibration, like they can't even. They're like clawing to like get something like real, to like experience something real. So.
Yeah, like your parents. My mom was always like full accepting, but also what you said about social media using it as a tool.
Yeah.
I remember in 10th grade, I had expressed on my Facebook page because I had an audience, like my friends, right? I knew people would see it if I shared a mass message, like, hey, I'm non-binary, call me Kai, and this is who I am. So everyone could do it at the same time, which is great. They had pronouns.
Yeah.
It was also sophomore year, coming to junior year of college. I had been non-binary for like 5 years. And I'm like, woman. But also expressing myself feminine and masculine. I like really embody that androgyny. But learning all the history, like LGBT history, like civil rights especially, learning the lesbian, like black lesbian women, black trans women,
yeah.
And just honoring what it means to be a woman. I just really feel so empowered, and that's now how I navigate my world, because I honor like the legacies of what like women have done for us. Black women, black trans women, they are the basement.
They are. I mean, if Marsha P. Johnson could do what she did back then, certainly we can carry that torch. We can't let it fizzle out. Let's just take it further. You know what I mean? And it's really about leading with love. Like, I'm never going to be like, well, okay, I go It's like, obviously, like, the Stonewall was violent and it needed to happen, but maybe now we can, well, it's just different types of people. We need all different types of people. I'm not gonna be that person who's like, rah, like out in the, like, I'm not gonna like go burn anything down. Like, I just refuse. Like, I don't think that's productive personally. But I mean, how can you speak to like someone else's experience? You can't, so whatever they're feeling, yeah. Oh, there's so many ways to go about this activism thing, but make sure that you're leading with love. That's the Cory way, personally. And it's not my way, it's just the love way. Love-centric, like, you know what I mean? Like, we're not breaking anything. And I only have like probably 3 minutes, but I do want to say, like, you know, a lot of like people who like counter this way of thinking will say like, oh, you're trying to destroy the nuclear family or destroy whatever, like, conventions, 100%, but it's not true. We're not trying to destroy anything. We're really just trying to add to it and build on it. I don't hate straight people. I hope none of you hate straight people. We need straight people. I wouldn't be here without a straight person. I don't think any of us would. So it's like kind of like, you know, it's recognizing, and that's how I've had these conversations with people who just don't see things my way. Okay, fine. I give them respect. You know what I mean? I give them respect. It's hard when they're like jerks about it, but like I still do it because it's like, you know, they do deserve it, like just like you do, just like we do. I think that's the way. It's that love connection, man. It's that love connection, human, human. So anyway, yeah, this was really awesome. I really love the energy in this room, and I really hope everyone watching was able to get something out of this. And I hope that we can all go out into the world, like, just kind of, I consider these really like check-ins. Like, I hope we can all now go out into the world like very grounded and aware of the messaging that we really want to put out and how important it is to really just keep that higher truth at the forefront. Lead with love, always, and maybe we can change the world, I don't know. Okay, so nothing but love. I'm gonna be around hanging out, but I'm very grateful for this. Thank you. I feel better, like not